Hello, welcome to Sheets Talk. My name is Greg. Today we're going to cover functions that help parse, organize, and find data in Google Sheets. All the sheets shown today are available for you via link after the presentation. You'll be able to create your own copy of this entire spreadsheet to try it for yourself. The walkthrough sheet will have the steps that we're going to be taking. There's also blank and completed version of the exercises that we're about to try. So if you want to try it, you can certainly do that just by downloading the copy of it. Hopefully you'll learn about one function or concept today that helps make your use of Sheets easier or more fun. Thanks for being here. Let's get into it. Here we've got a list of email addresses. With that list of email addresses, I'd like to find out who the person is by finding out their username and then finding out the domain from the email address as well. To get the username, we're going to use two formulas combined. One of the formulas we're looking at here is finds. We're finding the position of the @ symbol within the cell. And then from there, we're taking everything left of that position from that cell. So that's how we're getting the username there. It is pretty straightforward. What we can also do, instead of referring to the cell as B5, we can also refer to it as a name that I've created beforehand here called email. So I'm going to replace both these B5s with email, and I'll show you in a moment how we can name our own ranges. Great. So now that we've got the username, we're going to look at getting the domain, which is a little bit more complicated than getting the username. To show you how to do that, I'm going to break it down into two different formulas. The first one's going to break down line by line what we're going to be doing in the second formula. So let's take a look at it. The first formula here has a couple different lets. So lets allow us to define variables within a formula. So the first variable, we've defined 4 here. So the first one is domain start, and that's finding the @ position in the email. So instead of referring to it as B5, again, we're now referring to it as email. We're also finding the domain end, which is the position of the dot in email after the @ symbol. The third variable that we've got here is domain len, which is domain length. And that's calculated by taking the domain end minus domain start, which we've already defined ahead of time. The last variable here is username end. And that's what we're doing there is we are finding the position of the @ symbol within email again. So those are the 4 variables. And then the last line here is mid, which is the action line of this formula. It does what we want it to do. So last in the username, we saw left. This is mid for middle. There's also right is another function in Excel and Sheets. So this is taking the middle of email, starting at username end, which we've already defined, going to domain length, or the length of domain, which is the end point. So we're going to look at the next formula here, which is going to be the same answer. It's just not declaring those variables. So it's the same formula using mid of email, but instead of those variables all being declared, we're passing them in. So it looks a little more complicated, but really this formula is the same as this one, just without declaring the variables. So if you're working on this exercise afterwards, you'll be able to compare those two to find out how mid works a little bit more clearly. Now that we've got all 3 of those, let's highlight all 3 of those and copy them down by double-clicking on circle. Great, our whole range is now filled in. Now let's name the 2 ranges. So we've already named email. I've done that beforehand. So let's name username and domain. So to name username, let's select all of them. So Control-Shift down. And then up here in the top left, there's a name box. So I'll double-click there, type in username, and hit Enter. Now we'll do the same thing for domain. So Control-Shift down. I'm going to use Control-J to get into the domain box, or to the name box, and then type in domain and hit Enter there to name that range domain. Now that we have all of the domains for everybody in that list, let's find out the unique domains that exist in that list. So a list of just the unique ones, not repeated. To do that, we're going to use a couple different formulas combined. The first one I like to use is sort. Sort puts things in alphabetical order by default, which I just prefer. And the next one we're going to use is unique. So you can hit tab once you started typing a formula to finish it. You don't have to finish typing it. So the range we want to do a sort unique on is domain, which we've already defined, so we don't have to use the cells. We can just type in domain. Great, so we see all 5 of our domains there listed in alphabetical order that are unique. Now let's find out how many people from each of those domains appears in that list on the left. To do that, we're going to use COUNTIF, and we want to count domain. So again, it's already defined, so we can just use that. And we want to find within that domain, we want to count the times that Acme appears. So let's use G5. Great. So Acme, there's 7 people from Acme in that list. And if we just double click on the circle, it'll fill down and we can find out exactly how many people from each company are there. It's great that we know how many from each domain are there, but it would be even better to know which of the usernames or who is there from each of those domains. So what we'll do there is we're going to use basically the same formula to get the unique domain list, but we're going to put something in front of it called transpose. What transpose does, it will take our sort unique domain list, and instead of it being vertical, it will convert it to a horizontal. Perfect. So now we've got our domains listed as our headers, and with that, we can put a list of the usernames underneath. And how we're going to grab that, we're going to use, again, sort, and this time we'll use filter to bring in that list. So we want to filter the usernames, and we want to filter them with the domain equaling the cell above, the header. So in this case, it's going to be L4. So we'll hit enter there, and there are the 7 people from Acme that appear in that list on the left. There are their usernames, and we can just take that and drag it across, and it will fill in for us all the usernames for each of the companies or each of the domains that appear on that list. Perfect. Now we might want to know a little bit more about somebody or a username. We might want to find their first name and last name. Now this next scenario, we're going to assume that everybody from all the different companies all appears in the same list. So we're going to look at this blue people list here at the bottom, blue people sheet. So the blue people sheet has first name, last name, username, email, and company name. It does have every single person who could potentially be on our list, including more people than what we've seen already. So what we're going to do with it, we're going to take one of our usernames. I'm going to Control C, Control Shift V just to paste the values only, not the actual formula. From there, we're going to use a couple formulas to find our first name. So the first formula we're going to use is called index. And index is what we want to bring back. So it's the thing we want to return, the thing we want to appear here, and it is going to be first name for us. So we saw the first name in the people sheet. So let's go there. And it is column A is where all the first names are. So let's select that entire column. The next part is we want to tell the formula what we want to match on. So if we go back here, the first part of match is the username, the unique thing that we want to match on, the unique thing that we want to find, the unique value we have. So in this case, it's in G20. It's going to be the username, whatever username that is. The next part of match is where we want to go find that username. So which column has the username that we can find it so that we can bring back the first name. So if we go back to that people sheet, it's going to be the column C that has all the usernames there. So let's use that. Finally, we're going to use a comma and then 0 so we get an exact match from this formula. The last thing we're going to do here is we're going to lock in a cell or 2 cells. So how we do that is we use F4 and that puts $signs around our column and our row. What that means is if we copy this formula and paste it somewhere else, instead of that formula, that cell moving around, that reference, it's going to be always G20. If we press F4 again, we can lock in just the row. If we press F4 one more time, we can lock in just the column. We can go back to regular, or we can lock it in. I'm going to lock in both the column and the row for G20 and for the people username column. Let's hit enter there, and we find out that Emunti's first name is Emmeline. Now, because we've locked in both of those matching ranges, G20 and people C, we know that the first name and last name columns are next to each other in our source data. So we can Control C here and just Control V that formula over and find the last name instead of the first name. Great, so let's try another person here just to make sure it works. So we'll try Joby Dart, and there we go. We've got Joby's first and last name based on their username being returned. So that's index match to pull data from another range, another sheet, based on a value that you have in a range to match that sheet. Now, this example has been showing everybody being in the same page or everybody being on the same people blue sheet. In this next example, let's look at an example where people aren't on the same page, where they are spread across multiple sheets. So to do that, we're going to look at the green sheets at the bottom here. So there's 5 of them, 1 for each of the companies. They are the same format, but the data on them will be different depending on the company. So we've got first name, last name, username, company, and a new column, emails sent. So what we're trying to do here is we're going to try and find out how many emails have been sent to each of those companies. Now, to start with, what we'll do here is we will bring in basically the same formula we did before. We're going to do transpose, sort, unique, domain to get our headers. And what we're going to do next is we're going to actually name that. So I'm going to select all of the headers. I'm going to Control J to get into the name box. And I'm going to name that domain H for horizontal. Great. So as I mentioned, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to find the total emails sent per company. So you could do that with multiple formulas by doing sum and then going to each of the sheets and selecting the column where the totals are, and that works perfectly. So that certainly works. Instead of doing that, because then you would have to change the formula for each of the different sheets, we're going to use a formula that uses the header name and passes that into the formula in place of this reference up here. So we're still going to need the second part, so I'm going to point it out now, but exclamation E:E, that is part that we will need for our next formula, but we're going to use one formula that can be used for all of the companies instead of having to change our formula each time. All right, let's take a look at that. So we're again going to start with sum because we are still wanting to add up that E column from each of the sheets, but how we're going to find the data from that sheet is we're going to use indirect. So indirect allows us to use a cell or a text reference to go find data from another sheet to refer to another sheet in our page. So in our workbook. So we're going to refer to the cell above. So let's use L19. We can also use domain H, and we'll use that again later, but I just want to show you here that we're using the word Acme or the text in the cell above us, L19. Then we're going to use ampersand, and what ampersand does is it concatenates values together in a cell. So we've got and as I mentioned before, we want to use that E:E, the exclamation mark E:E to refer to that cell, that column in that range, and the quotes around it to make it text because it wouldn't, the formula wouldn't understand it to be text without those quotes. Great. So let's hit enter there and we find out, yeah, as we saw before, Acme has 97 emails that have been sent to them. And we can just slide this right over because this formula will work for each of them. It will go find that number or that column and sum it up based on the header being named differently. Great. So next thing I'll show you is how we would get a list of people together from multiple different lists. So in our example at the top here, we've got people across 5 different companies. Let's put them all into one list here so that we can do some math together. So we'll use sort again, and the new part here is going to be VSTACK or vertical stacking. So how this works is it will stack ranges with a comma between. So we select our ranges, put a comma between each of them, and that will put all these usernames into one stack for us, into one list. So there we go. We've got everybody sorted and listed into one stack that appeared in that list above, all 25 of them. What we can do now is we can find out how many emails each of these people have been sent. So up above, we found out how many emails have been sent to that company. But it'd be nice to find out how many emails B Cheng has been sent total or has sent total. And instead of finding it out per page or looking for that username, we don't know who B Cheng works for yet. So we'll use one formula to find it out for everybody. So to do that, it's going to be, instead of sum, we're going to use SUMIFS to put a dependency in there or a criteria in there. The first part of SUMIF, though, is going to be the same as what we saw in sum. We're going to use indirect to go to, let's use domain H instead of the cell reference. So we'll use domain H just to show you that the name ranges work there instead of referring to it as L19. But we'll still need ampersand, quote, and the column reference E. The next part of SUMIFS is the range where the criteria is, where all the criteria are. So in this case, we're looking for the username column from that same sheet, right? So we can find out if bcheng9 is in that username column before we sum up the email sent column in E. So we're going to use indirect again, and we're going to use domain H again. And this time, instead of E, again, we're looking for a different column. So we're looking for column C, which was the username column we saw before. And then the last part of SUMIFS is we just have to tell it what the criteria needs to match on. So in this case, it's going to be K22, cell K22, which is where bchang9 is. And I'm actually going to lock that in. I'm going to press F4 3 times to lock that in as a column. Hit enter there, and bchang does not work for Acme. It does not appear. So let's drag them over so we find out where they work. It looks like bchang is from Bluth Homes, and they have 9. So instead of going to each of these sheets to find out where bchang is, we're able to find out where their data is or where their totals are with one formula. And we can double click that row and copy it down and get the numbers for everyone. So everyone there is listed. So next thing we're going to do before we play with the numbers here more, let's do a list of people instead of the list being all on this sheet. So everybody here is, right in front of us. We can see them. Let's take a list of all of the users across all 5 of our sheets and the entire list of users. So instead of just 25, we're going to be bringing in 100 people in this list. And I'm going to do that by showing you a different formula here. So let me get rid of that one, and I'm going to put in a different formula here. I'm just going to paste it in, and I will show you how it works instead of typing it in because it's a little longer. So it looks pretty complicated, but really it is the same thing that we've been looking at. So we've got a VSTACK and an indirect with the header row here, L19, M19, N19, O19, and P19 to refer to each of the companies. So again, what we're doing here is we're going to each of those sheets and getting all of the usernames from that C column, right? So that's what we're doing for each of those. Now, the reason we have to then repeat it, so we've got the same thing twice here, is for the filter. So at the end of the filter here, what we're saying is that the thing that we're stacking here, all the data must equal something, has to be less than or equal to anything. And what that helps us do is it removes the blanks. So if we didn't have this filter in this formula, we'd be pulling in a list of people, including all the blanks rows. In this case, we are filtering those out using that filter function. So now if we take a look here, we can see that we've got a full list of 100 people here listed, and we've got the total for them. So let's just copy that down. We'll just double click that so we get the sum for each person. Great. So next step, let's take a look at maybe finding out the total from those people, how we would do that to make it a little easier instead of having to look across 5 columns to find out which, how many A Claire 24 has been sent, how many emails they've been sent. Let's just add a total email column here so that way we can just have that sum a little bit easier. So I'm going to show you something a little bit different here. Instead of just summing up the total, we're actually going to use 2 other formulas ahead of it. We're going to use if, which is just a logical expression. So we can put any sort of equation or any sort of action here, and then we can say what would happen if it was true or what would happen if that was false. So in this case, we're going to say if a particular cell is blank. So we're going to use is blank. So all that is saying is L20, does it have anything in it? If it is blank, we want nothing to happen. So that's why I'm going to put double comma there. If it is not blank, if there is data in L20, I'm going to say let's sum up L20 through to P20. So in this case, because there is data there, we know there are 496 emails that have been sent total across the companies. Now, if we just copy that formula, we can paste it all the way down to all of the rows. And because we've put if is blank in there, at a spot where there is no data, we don't have an error. There is no 0. There is nothing showing up here that would be wrong. It just kind of keeps the table nice and clean. So just adding if is blank will do that. Then if you wanted to add in, if you did add a number, that field will fill in, if the filter changed here. Great. So now that we know how many emails have been sent to each person, let's get a list of people based on the number of emails have been sent to them. Let's get something that we can filter and see how many people have been sent 1 email, how many people have been sent 10 emails. So what we'll do here is we're going to get a filter. Actually, what we'll do first is we're going to name some ranges. So let's name all the users. Let's select all these users that we just brought in. Let's Control-C, Control-Shift-V to paste them as values, just so that we're not relying on that formula anymore. And then what we're going to do is we'll go into the name box from there, and we'll name this all users. And then similarly with the email, so the totals column, Let's grab those and let's go Control J and we'll go emails sent. There we go. So we've named both of those new ranges so that we can use them over here. So yeah, let's find a list of those users based on how many emails they've been sent. So we've seen this before, but it's going to be very similar. So it's going to be sort, filter, and we're looking to filter all users. And we're going to use three different criteria for that filter. So the first criteria is that we want sent emails, or emails sent, excuse me, to be greater than 0. So they have been sent an email or sent an email. The next one we'll use email sent again, and we'll say that email sent needs to be greater than or equal to our minimum email sent field there, and that's in T22. The last one we'll do is email sent, and we'll say we want that to be less than or equal to, and then we'll say T25 for our max. Great, let's hit enter there, and now we've got a list here of all the users that have been sent between 1 and 10 emails. Let's find out how many users that is. So to do that, we're just going to use count A, which counts text. And we're going to do start that at U20, which is where our first username is. And we're just going to go to the end of U, so the entire column. And that way, if we change our filter, if we have a different number there, that'll reflect in our total. So great, we've got 90 people that have been sent between 1 and 10 emails. Let's find out what happens when we change this number to 1 and we change this one to 10. Oh, we've hit an error, which doesn't look good, and it gives us a number here which is not correct because we're just counting values. How we're going to avoid that is we're going to add an if error to the beginning of this formula. So simply typing in if error and a bracket, and then we don't need anything at the end. It'll automatically fill in an end bracket for us. And that's perfect. That's all we need now when there is a number that doesn't make sense, like you can't have sent minimum 3 and maximum 1. It just won't appear anything. Now, when we reverse it or when we add either just 1 or a number that makes sense, it will appear. Those people will appear again. Perfect. That is what I have to show you today. So again, everything is available. I will make the link available to you. You'll be able to make a copy of this spreadsheet. This walkthrough page here has the steps that we've just taken. The steps are color-coded based on the part of the exercises. You will have a blank exercise sheet as well as this completed sheet that you'll be able to review. Yeah, thanks so much for viewing and have a great day.